Greetings from Australia. It's a great pleasure to participate in Geographies of the Senses, albeit remotely, on this perfect day. I'm speaking from a paddock on my family's farm on Gunningland Creek, an ephemeral tributary of the Lachlan River in central western New South Wales, which we're slowly rehabilitating, as you can see from the little trees around me. In terms of global geography, I'm more than 10,000 miles, as the crow flies, from the Derbyshire Eco Centre, or nearly 17,000 kilometres. Marianne Jacques from outside western Bathurst, a small city some 2 hours drive east of here, is videoing me so that even if our live Skype connection fails, I'll still have a virtual presence at your gig. Such are the geographies of 21st century globalisation. Here in Australia, we non-Indigenes have a tradition of acknowledging country, a protocol with which we demonstrate our respect for the first peoples whose homelands our predecessors conquered and colonised some 200 years ago. I live in Wiradjuri country, so I acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as its traditional custodians. I pay my respect to all the elders, past and present, of the Wiradjuri nation, and extend my respect to all other First Peoples. In the words of poet Jonathan Hill, a Durga man, we honour the presence of these ancestors who reside in the imagination of this land, and whose irrepressible spirituality flows through all creation. Most of my own ancestors were boat people from Scotland, England, Wales and Ireland. For the Wiradjuri, their arrival was an apocalypse, an invasion even more catastrophic than your own Roman, Saxon and Norman conquests. The British conquest of Australia has meant, however, that we contemporary Australians are part of that vast cultural amalgam known as the West. A very imperfect term around which I always put sneer quotes. Those of us born and raised within these cultural traditions tend to understand our external world as being mediated by 5 senses associated with 5 primary sense organs: our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and our largest organ of all, our skin. We now know, however, that we humans have myriad other senses, which I expect you've already explored. But what about all our apparently extrasensory perceptions? The hallucinatory visions, hunches, gut feelings, intuitions, premonitions, and other paranormal phenomena many of us experience. What are they? Do they constitute a sixth sense, as some people suggest? Frankly, I don't know what to say about them. I do know, however, that people raised in non-European cultural traditions understand their sensory perceptions very differently from those of us who are immersed in Western cultures. On the Indonesian island of Java, for example, people traditionally tend to list their senses as seeing, hearing, smelling, talking and feeling. Kashinuan people from Peru identify 6 senses, or forms of sentience or knowledge, or intelligence at least. These are associated with their 6 sense organs: their skin, hands, eyes, ears, liver, and genitals. People raised in South and East Asian cultural traditions also tend to recognize 6 sensory organs, or gateways: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. In Buddhism, for example, the mind, as a sensory organ, is associated with Dharma, which can be translated as mental phenomena, to include our feelings, perceptions, volition or desire, and all the memories and imaginings we recount as stories or narratives. It's this so-called sixth sense, or sixth gateway, and the stories that pass through it, that I'd like to talk about. It's what some people call the mind-narrative nexus. Being able to tell stories is, of course, a defining characteristic of our species. We're immersed in stories from birth, from even before birth. We imbibe them, digest them, internalize, change, and regurgitate them. Stories, as narrated in words, images, even music, allow us to understand or cognize our world by chunking its infinite complexity into easily digestible bits. It's with such representations of reality, whether they be true stories or fictions, that we make sense of the world. And since we're talking about sense and senses, the narratives we imbibe and tell also give us our so-called sense of place, our sense of belonging, our sense of history, and our sense of the future and its possibilities. But there's more, because stories are also the very resources from which we co-create our social worlds, all those collectivities we're part of, our families, communities, networks, organisations, religions, nation-states, societies, cultures, even civilizations, and from which we also co-create ourselves, our individual identities, our sense of meanness, or who we are in the world. Cognitive scientists, narrative psychologists, philosophers, even some literary theorists tend to agree that, as a species, we humans co-create the story that is me by appropriating narratives from our social environments and integrating our own idiosyncratic experiences into them. The general consensus is that, as Molly Andrews tells us, we become who we are through telling stories about our lives and living the stories we tell. Our sense of who we are in the world is thus contingent upon the stories we're exposed to in our daily lives and the stories we participate in or enact through our social relationships within those vastly complex narrative concoctions we call cultures. Within this paradigm, human individuals and collectivities can be seen as being continually constructed and reconstructed through the embodied social practice of storytelling, which is a creatively collaborative process which enables us to assume the common we of mutual recognition, as philosopher David Carr so nicely expresses it. Most of us are exposed to fresh stories every day, some of them visionary and life-affirming, some of them pathologically not. We tend to accept and internalize the stories we believe to be true and reject the others. We then enact, embody, embed, reify or materialize these stories to co-create all the towns, cities, farms, dams, transport systems, factories, information technologies and communication networks we depend on, and all the other stuff we surround ourselves with. Along with the perverse consequences of our behaviours, such as global warming, pollution, species loss, and land and water degradation. But whatever identities we claim, whatever our cultural backgrounds, our vocational callings, our daily lives, all of us participating in this gig are surely committed to changing our societies to reverse the damages of our collective behaviours in the past. And the only way we can change any human collectivity, be it a family, an organisation, a city, town or village, a nation, state, religion, culture or civilization, is by introducing new stories into these communities' repertoires, or by re-emplotting already familiar stories from different perspectives, which is what we writers, artists and other creatives are doing all the time. Now more than ever, we need inclusively life-affirming stories which enable people to understand the impacts of our collective actions and to redefine our relationships with one another and with other species. With such stories, we can change the world. This is the psychic power of Dharma and of our 6th century organ, our mind. With it comes profound moral responsibilities. Thank you.